Most people think of adaptation and evolution as a process of leveling up, like in a video game, not a process that takes place over a long time and can be affected by simple changes and adaptations. A change in the local environment can drive white moths to near extinction. A highway being built over a swamp can cause frogs to be nearly wiped out by the cars. Humanity is another vector on the process of evolution on this planet, just like every other environmental factor. So the question often becomes, how do you minimize or even have a positive impact on your environment? In the example of the frogs, you could build a tunnel underneath the highway, except doing so only tells all the predators where the frogs are. So you save them from one threat, but you create a brand new threat. This isn't evolution, but it is an adaptation from creatures and what they already have available to themselves. The esoteric world behaves in much of the same way. As humanity learns to adapt to the monsters out there, as technology advances, monsters of the old world adapt and new monsters arise. If the beast outside is not able to come out during daytime, it finds a dark tunnel that it can hide in, waiting for people to come by. If a ghost haunts new homes by sending missives through the mail, but most unknown mail is now just thrown out, it learns to attach itself to pamphlets tucked into the door or through your email. This often leaves the exoteric and esoteric worlds in a never-ending arms race of adaptation and evolution. If a new weapon or technology makes an old threat obsolete, the threat adapts, or it's replaced by something else. The following two stories take place less than 10 kilometers apart, but they are separated by 40 years in two very different forms of undead, both of which were spurred on by the same adaptation. The first story is told from the perspective of a forest ranger from the 2710s and a hitchhiker from the 2750s. These journals are both about the same radical new technology introduced to the northern forest that saved countless lives and completely changed the politics and culture of the northern forest. The technology? The highway. September 3rd, 2710 AUC. The highway was only finished last year, and already the town of Norn-Glade is thriving. I remember growing up in this town where my grandfather and father spent their entire lives, where the only jobs were the lumber mill, truck driver, or the tavern. When the tribal governments of the northern forest created the highway system connecting the many towns and cities of the northern forest to each other, they followed the old trails, and now we have a better connection. So now we have tourists from down south, and we have better infrastructure to bring lumber and minerals to the nations to the south. So now there's motels, gift shops, a diner, and even a bank in Norn-Glade, and there's a brand new job, a career for me other than driving a truck or cutting down trees. The forest rangers. The northern forest is a beautiful place to live, but it's also a very dangerous place, especially at night. Even with all the warnings, public announcements, and the requirement of passports, tourists, or even locals, make dumb decisions when traveling up and down the Northern Forest Highway 17. They see a perfect place for a picnic and they don't care about the fact that the clearing is a picturesque setting surrounded by mushrooms, and they go in and they never want to leave. Where they see a deer at the edge of the woods, perfectly tame, worthy of taking out the camera, getting a picture with your children next to the large deer with very large antlers. If they're lucky, the deer is actually a deer, a dangerous and often unpredictable animal that may choose to run, or just as easily to fight back with antlers that are sharp and strong enough to kill a man very easily. If they're unlucky, it was never a deer, and they will be wishing they were dead. Then there's the greatest threat of the darkness, the Fiends. The undead who die in the forest, who seek out other living things to hunt and eat. They come out at night. You can hear them whistling. They only stop whistling when they find their own prey. There's rangers that travel through the woods hunting these fiends down. But my role in the rangers was very different. The exact roles were all still being figured out. There were a lot of roles and a lot of jobs for the people of the Northern Forest. The lifeguards, my role, were patrolling the roads between the towns, during both the night and day, seeing if anyone was lost on the roads between the towns. Sometimes they just need someone to guide them from campsites, rest stops, or from the abandoned work towns. There are, however, those who need a different kind of help. Sometimes cars and trucks break down. That is a simple fact of life. Even on the smoothest and most isolated road, accidents happen. People aren't always prepared, and if a car breaks down, then there may be no way to call for help. Being kilometers away from the nearest town meant being kilometers away from the nearest phone, the nearest auto repair shop. During the day, the forest isn't so bad while people walk the roads. They might even make it to a town before the sun goes down. When the sun goes down, however, the northern forest is a very different beast. The animals of the forest can be deadly during the day, but at night people can't see them coming, and the predators aren't afraid of the road when there's no cars around. And as dangerous as the animals are, the fiends that roam the forest are far deadlier. The fiends are the dead bodies that were left unburied and unburned in the forest. When the sun goes down, they start hunting the living, whether it's animal or human. They will seek life out and try to kill it, ripping it to pieces and consuming it, creating more of the fiends as long as they die in the forest. You know they're close by when you hear them whistling. Whether the body used to be a deer, human, or spider, they all know how to whistle. They only stop for two reasons: when the sun is up and they're hidden from the light of the sun, or if they see their prey. For thousands of years, the fiends were so dangerous that both trails and cabins were built as regular stops. People to rest as they made their way through the forest to get to the towns and cities. These same cabins became the rest stops, and the trails became our roads. And with the invention of the highway and the cars, we could have forest rangers traveling at night to make sure any broken down drivers are helped. It was this last year that I drove up and down these roads at night to see if there's anyone I could help. Over the last year, I found over 3 dozen backpackers and hitchhikers, bringing them back to town, get them set up for the night in the local motel, and the next day the mechanic heads down to the car to tow it in and then fix the car. And in the case of the backpackers, we bring them back to town and give a map on which trails and campsites are safe for hiking. It feels good to help people, and I didn't encounter any fiends. At least until that horrible night. I was driving down Road 15, a small side road that sometimes tourists go down, thinking they'll see more down that road than they would on the highway. As I approached kilometer 5, I saw a car pulled over to the side. I called into Norn-Glade that I was checking on a golden Sotomobile I found near kilometer 5. I stepped out to get to the car to see if something was wrong. The driver's side door was open, and the inside of the car was full of broken glass. Glass broken from the back glass broken into. I shined my light into the car to try and figure out what happened. There was a thermos of coffee spilled over, and the spilled coffee was still hot enough to have steam. The radio was playing some local music from Norn-Glade, and the keys in the ignition were gone. while the car was in park and the engine was off. Something caused the driver to run out of the car in a hurry, probably something to do with the broken back glass. I shone my light into the back seat and my heart almost stopped when I saw what was back there. The broken glass had blood scattered across the seats and through the window, and on the floor was a single white children's shoe. The shoe leather splattered in blood that was starting to turn brown. Ah, Tavit, I swore as I shined my light into the forest, and I could see the trail leading deeper inside. I shined my light into the forest, and in the darkness I could see distant movement and whistling. I stood where the road ended and the forest began as I was at war with myself. My training and common sense taught me to not pursue anyone who went into the forest. Going into the northern forest at night was a death sentence if you're unprepared. If I went after them, then I wouldn't be saving anyone. I would just be adding another fiend, making it harder for the rangers to find the bodies. At the same time, my heart wanted me to run after them, to try and find the driver and the child, maybe finding or even saving them both. After all, if I could hear the fiends, then the fiends weren't hunting, and if they're not hunting, then it was safe. It was a short distance, just go a few steps into the forest to confirm if they're alive or dead. It was so easy, my heart said to myself, while I let my head catch up to my heart as I dropped my flashlight along with my heart. The fiends were whistling. That meant they weren't hunting right now. If the child was taken inside the forest and their parents followed, then fiends would have definitely been hunting, especially after someone making so much noise. So if the fiends weren't hunting now, that meant there was nothing in the area for them to hunt. I trudged back to my car, but as I opened the door, I noticed something. The whistling stopped. I shone my flashlight around the car to see where the fiends were, and I could see them. They stood on the brush, careful not to touch the road. For some reason, fiends don't like walking on stone nor asphalt. I watched as they stalked me from the shadows, most of them wearing clothes worn out from the forest and the scavengers picking at their flesh and clothes. At the head of the fiends, I saw the father who was driving the car. I knew it was him because he wore a golden suit that matched his Sodomobile, his key still in his right hand, clutched like it was a weapon. The wound on his dark skin was almost invisible if you don't know what to look for, just hidden underneath his outfit and visible on the right side of his neck. Barely visible, but he must have bled out inside his clothes, trying to use his keys as an improvised weapon while he fought back against the fiends. What I was not expecting was for the fiend to speak. "Help me," the poor creature rasped out. I was frozen in disbelief. Fiends don't speak. It is one of the rules that we're very firm about them. They don't even have enough of a self left over to answer an arch question. They whistle, and that's about it. And here I was staring at a fiend who was trying to speak to me. Was he even a fiend, or was he somehow alright despite his own injury? I had to test it. I had to ask an arch question to see if he did respond, or if somehow escaping gas just somehow managed to sound exactly like words. If that was the case, then I knew I had to leave the fiends alone. If it did respond to my question, then it was something else entirely. "Where does the world rest?" I asked, hoping to get no response. As the arch question echoed through the forest, I could hear whispers among the friendly ones in the leaves, and among the fiends there was only silence. I let out a sigh before the father spoke again. Please help me, he rasped again as the connection was clear. Whatever that was, it wasn't a fiend. It wasn't sentient, but it was definitely speaking, so it wasn't a fiend. A brand new kind of undead meant a new danger. I wished at that moment I had a gun, and instead all I could do was get into my car. As I drove away, I mentally prepared how to explain this to Norn-Glade. When I saw a figure sticking out thumb as they walked alongside the road. A figure that would need my help. The monster left behind was already forgotten as I pulled over to the left side of the road. I looked through the windows to see who it was. A young girl who wore a yellow dress and who was carrying a stuffed animal in her arms. She was walking on the road, so she wasn't a fiend, and she was also holding out her thumb like a hitchhiker. So clearly, she wasn't a fiend or any kind of undead. I opened the passenger door and I could see her looking down at her feet, like she was ashamed. Whatever happened to cause this young girl to wander through the northern forest at night, it wasn't my business. My business was just helping her. Do you need help getting to town? I asked her. I could hear a very soft voice responding, Yes. Well, come on in. Just be sure to buckle up, I told her, as she stepped into the car wearing only a single brown stained white shoe. She buckled up and stared out of the window, not facing me at all, as we started to drive and I tried to get her to talk. But no matter what I tried to ask her, she only responded in single word responses. Where are your parents? Gone. Are there people expecting you in town? No. What's your name? Abby. Are you hungry? Very. Are you cold? Yes. After a while, I stopped trying to get her to talk as I drove her to Norn-Glade. I called in through the civilian band to let the ranger station know that I was coming in with a civilian hitchhiker and that I would need to file an incident report. The attendant barely acknowledged it. The only information I got from her was to come back to town as quickly as possible because something was changing out in the forest tonight. I didn't even get a chance to talk about what happened with the Fiends before someone else took over the channel to talk about something happening on Route 13. Which is strange because we aren't supposed to go onto Route 13. As we drove, eventually I turned on the radio. I let the radio play the tunes from Norn-Glade. The radio stations are one of the only consistent things about the Northern Forest. Some of them are extremely isolated, but they act as a communication network and a source of entertainment for the entire forest. Still, as the violin started to play on the radio, Abby started to whistle along with the tune. When I heard that whistle, something inside my chest froze. The whistling tune was very familiar, something I heard every night for my entire life. Even inside the town, the whistles carry for miles, especially when there's thousands of them nearby. The whistle enters your dreams and your subconscious, a warning that danger is nearby and one you can never truly remember and yet can never forget. I kept my eyes on the road as the music kept playing, and as it continued to unsettle me, I turned the radio off, only for Abby to continue her whistling. Staring out the window, her whistling carried on without her saying anything. I slowed the car to a stop and turned the engine off, and she still kept whistling. Something was deeply wrong here, but even for something being wrong, she couldn't be a fiend. Fiends don't speak with words, and they don't whistle when prey is so nearby. Deciding I had to make a choice, I asked, "Are you okay, Abby?" I asked, and the whistling stopped. She made no noise and she kept staring out the window. I reached up to flip on my dome lights, and in the light I could get a better view of the young girl. Her yellow dress was stained with mud and covered in rocks. There were multiple cuts on the dress, and I could see glass shards sticking out of her back. They were very large, with the largest the size of my hand, unseen in the darkness. Her hair was tangled and messed up with sticks and dirt in it, and I could still not see her face, but in the reflection I could see part of her face. In the reflection I could see that the glass shards made it to her eyes as well. She was unable to close her eyes. Her nose was torn off, practically just a hole in her face. It was her mouth that was the most unsettling part of her face. Her lips were gone, chewed through by her own teeth. Her yellow teeth were freshly coated in blood, and I could see her still silently chewing her own lips. "Abby, are you human?" I asked her, only for her to finally answer. "No." "Are you going to hurt me?" I asked her, only for her to turn to face me. Her dead eyes and sharp teeth appeared as a threat before she whispered, "No." Oddly enough, that was a bit of a relief for me, until I saw that the animal in Abby's arms wasn't stuffed at all. It was the remains of a white rabbit with its neck twisted as its eyes opened and it lunged towards me, the teeth gnashing and the rabbit screaming at me. If you've never heard a rabbit scream, consider yourself lucky. It sounded like the scream of a small child, and as the screaming abomination fought to escape Abby's tight grasp, as it kept lunging towards me as I desperately opened the door and fell out of the car, kicking both Abby and the rabbit. The rabbit leapt after me, snarling and screaming as it kicked its legs and leapt into the air, almost like it was dancing. Rabbits will hop into the air kicking their legs together like that as a sign of happiness and to show they feel safe. Bloody Bunny leapt towards me, only for me to swing my flashlight at the leaping rabbit, throwing it into the nearby bushes. I turned to where Abby was, where she was crawling slowly out of the car. She stood up slowly. Her scrapes and cuts were bright purple, and I could see blood slowly dripping from her face and dribbling down her legs. Glassy eyes stared at me as she lifted her hands up, as she reached out towards me where I was down on the ground. "Are you going to hurt me?" I asked, and she responded with a single word, "No," as she wrapped her fingers around my neck and her teeth drew close to my face. Thankfully, still carrying the heavy flashlight, I hit her in the head, which caused her to fall to the ground, losing her grip on my neck. Now free, and with Abby apparently stunned, I quickly got back into my car as I drove forward, only to pause for a moment, seeing Abby get back up and lift her arms up, like she was asking me for a hug as she slouched towards the car. I flipped the car into reverse and rammed into her. I heard two additional thuds underneath my tires as I now saw Abby lying on the road in front of the car. No longer moving, I did not want to risk it. I switched back to drive as I drove over Abby, and I heard the sound of a wet pop underneath the tires as I drove back to Norn-Glade. I tried calling them over the radio a few times, but each time I got nothing, just static and no response, not even from the other rangers. So I drove towards the town, hoping for more answers. As the dawn's first lights filtered through the canopy, The radio stopped playing music completely. When that happened, ice filled my veins. The disc jockeys lined up hours worth of music at a time. They kept the music going, what would remain a beacon of hope and safety in the northern forest. If the music stopped, then either that means the music was stopped, or there was no one left to keep the music playing. When I made it to Norn-Glade, it was a ruin. The windows were shattered, the blood was on the streets, and there was utter silence. At this point, the whistling in the woods should still be heard. Instead, there was just the sound of the engine and my own breathing as I drove through the town. The post office's front wall was smashed in by a truck. The motel's pool was currently on fire, and inside the flaming pool, I could see figures moving in the flames. I did the only thing I could think of, and I made my way to the ranger station. The station was still standing, but when I saw it, my heart sank. The windows were intact, there was no wreckage, and no blood on anything. If you took a quick look at it, it would have looked normal. There were rangers and civilians up front. Some were sweeping, others were waving at me, and a few were even sipping from mugs on the table. I wanted to believe everything was normal, and I was among friends. Except the more I looked at everything, the more off everything looked. The mugs were full of water, and the water was flung into their faces as they drank. The people sweeping were sweeping the same spot with no change, even if it was clean. Then there's people waving. Some were missing fingers, one was missing a jaw, leaving a bloodless wound on their face. Their eyes were lifeless, and it was clear. They were all dead. Dead, but still moving. Unlike the fiends, they weren't whistling, and they were carrying on the road like it was no issue. I turned my car around, and I drove away. As I drove out of town, I saw more people from town, now slouching around and moving. Some were simply slouching and dragging along like the father, but a lot of them, when I got close, stuck out their thumbs like they were hitchhiking, and I could hear them all saying the same thing. Help me. The raspy voices that replaced the whistling in the dark with desperate pleadings in the daylight. They slouched after the car, desperate for me to pull over and let them in. As tempting as it was to run them over, it would have slowed me down and brought more towards me. So I decided to drive away, first to the shitty gas station at the edge of town, a place where the pumps were filled for you, but I knew how to fill it. I filled my gas tank, seeing the empty, blood-smeared windows of the gas station. I listened carefully to my surroundings as I filled my tank and my gas cans when I heard a gasp and I tried to figure out where it was coming from before I realized it was coming from my radio that I left on. Help me. Help me. Help me. The former disc jockey whispered through the radio waves. They somehow figured out how to use the radio station. I would have to make it away from here, head to Kamid, the nearest big city, and tell them what happened. If I wasn't quick, then there would be no one to warn them about what happened in Norn-Glade. My canisters and my gas tank filled, I drove northeast, following Road 12 as I passed the turnoff for Route 13. I could see the barrier was removed. A truck smashed through the blockade that once blocked off the tunnel. Inside the tunnel, I could hear whistling, and I kept driving, hopeful to eventually escape the radio waves telling me to help the monsters. As I passed by village after village, town after town, I connected to many radio stations. Hamid, Brooksdale, Woodtown, Wintermore, Eastwood. They all shared the same fate. They all played the same thing. A single raspy voice begging for someone to help them. Even as I drove away, I could feel the twinge of doubt. What if they were a real person? What if they were just raspy? What if I was abandoning someone to die? I had to harden my heart as I kept driving, hoping to find one radio station that was still playing music instead of playing a call for help that was a trap for the living. I would drive almost all day before I found a single radio station that played music. This would someday be known as the Norn incident. A sudden adaptation of the Fiends created a brand new subspecies of undead known as the Hitchhikers. They were capable of doing the same actions in death that they did a lot of in life. They could repeat phrases and words they said in life, and they don't seem too much smarter than fiends and thankfully don't work together. Unlike other forms of undead, they do make plans and they can be patient, waiting for prey for hours or even months at a time. They can walk on hard surfaces, unlike the fiends, and they operate during daylight hours. Like the fiends, though, they cannot leave the northern forest, and if they can't move, the northern forest will claim their bodies, if the roots can reach them. They are deadly in the towns and villages where the same infrastructure that kept the settlements safe from the fiends now keep the hitchhikers safe from the forest and any attempts to destroy them. They fortunately don't spread easily, having to bite and then kill a body for them to turn into a hitchhiker. If they are just killed, then they become a fiend. If they are just bitten, people can usually recover. After the Norn incident, the forest rangers banded together with various militaries to reclaim the land lost to the dead. They were successful and new adaptations were made to avoid another incident similar to the Norn incident. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, something else evolved from this adaptation.